Thanks for listening to this episode of Orion's From the Battlefield to the Boardroom podcast. According to the Small Business Administration, about a quarter of veterans are interested in starting their own business, and roughly 15% of franchises are owned by veterans. There are so many franchises out there to choose from, and finding a good match can take time and research. If you're interested in pursuing a franchise opportunity, today's episode is for you. Matt Murphy, Navy veteran, CEO, board member, and business owner, joins the show to discuss his background and share why veterans are a great fit for business ownership. Matt is also joined by Joe Ross, owner of Ross Franchise Consulting, a company that connects individuals seeking more fulfillment in their professional lives to meaningful franchise ownership opportunities. Throughout the episode, we discuss the benefits of business ownership, advantages of working with a franchise consultant to help you find the best fit, and advice for veterans who want to get started on this journey. If you'd like to connect with Joe to learn more about how franchise ownership can help you achieve your goals, visit us online at the link in the show notes. If you have any questions about this interview or ideas for a future topic, I'd love to hear from you. Please send me an email at podcast@oriontalent.com. Hi, Matt and Joe. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you both. Joe, we've worked together plenty in the past, so I would love for our audience to hear kind of more about what you're doing and the services that you can offer to them. But before we get into that, Matt, you are a really good guest for us to have today. Really great for the franchise ownership topic. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself, and just excited to tell our audience about your journey?
Sure. Thank you, Megan. It's great to be with you both today, and great to, it's a topic that I'm really excited to talk about. So my background is I started my career as a naval officer. I went through NROTC, and that was my commissioning source. I spent 4 years as a surface warfare officer, mostly shipboard, based out of San Diego, many years ago, and transitioned out after 4 years. I probably, as I think back to that time, this is 1992. So I think as I was transitioning out, it's probably the issues that I had then are a lot of the same issues that folks might be engaging with us today had at the same time. So I ended up deciding to go to law school, and some of that decision was default almost. It was, well, I'm not really sure what it's like in the real world. So that'll give me 3 years to figure it out, and you can't go wrong with a law degree. So that was my rationale. Not nearly as many resources for folks in transition as there are today. So fortunately, this is a pre-internet time that I'm talking about. But fortunately, there's so many great resources like Megan's podcast and this event that will give folks that resource. So I practiced law for a handful of years. I worked in a variety of companies after I stopped practicing law. One of those was a company called Recruit Military, so connects corporate America to veterans. So again, spent a lot of time working with and talking to people that are thinking about how they want to best leverage their career in the military and their time in the military for the best civilian opportunity. From there, I had a chance to be a CEO of a revenue cycle management company. So the last 15 years, I've been running companies for private equity, run 3, and very likely will be running a 4th in the next month or so.
Awesome. So Matt, you obviously have a very accomplished background, and it sounds like a lot of the work that you did after you transitioned out of the military was very purpose-driven, being a lawyer and then also working with Recruit Military CEO. So was that something that you kind of wanted to continue the purpose that you had in the military after you transitioned out?
Yeah, I think for me that purpose really matters. I think for most people it does. I think all work has value. I think if you manufacture paper clips, there's value in that. But for me, I've spent the last 10 years in healthcare businesses primarily, and again, I think starting my career in the military gave me that feeling of wanting to jump out of bed because I knew the work was important, and I've been able to carry that through, and that's one of the things that I look for in opportunities as I've managed my career, is that it's got to be something I believe in, and I'd imagine that most folks that are going to be paying attention to this are going through the very same thing.
Yeah, definitely. So, Joe, you have been waiting patiently, and you play a big role here because you actually connected me with Matt. So, can you please give a little overview of yourself and what you're up to?
Absolutely. Always good to talk to you, Megan. And I could listen to Matt all day. He's been a longtime friend and mentor. And so I will let him run with this as much as he wants to. But yes, thanks for having me on. I spent the last 20 plus years in business, and the vast majority of that has been in the franchising space, which growing up, coming out of school, getting to the professional world meant nothing to me. I didn't even know what existed. You know, we heard of the NFL and McDonald's. That was the only franchises I knew. And frankly, I had no intention of being in the franchise space, but I've followed kind of a personal philosophy of follow good people, and that happened to lead me to franchising, and been very happy about that. And I've found just an incredible community, and really enjoyed that for the last 15 plus years, specifically helping people in really positions of transition. Um, People that are interested in ownership, but they're not business owners. You know, they say 75% of America has considered business ownership, yet the actual ownership ratios are far, far smaller than that.
Mhm.
And so I spent the last 15 years working for individual companies, organizations, including some that Matt has led, and then now independently with Ross Franchise Consulting, helping folks sort out is business ownership and specifically franchising the right place for them, the right step for them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that stat about 75%, but I would assume that, especially in recent years, which actually I'm curious, Joe, to hear from you, maybe not the question right now, but just in terms of how things have changed over really the last 5 years. I mean, we've all heard about economic uncertainty and layoffs, and I think people who are getting out of the military, so that transition, but then also just in general, people in the corporate workforce that are looking for something that maybe allows a little bit more flexibility and that they can kind of build their life around instead of working for somebody else, having the flexibility. So, just curious, have you seen kind of an uptick in sort of interest levels there over the last few years?
I think the interest level has always been there. I
Yeah.
think what's interesting maybe for our audience is um, those that have served are almost are 45% more likely to own a business.
Mm.
That's a big difference between your average Joe
Yeah.
per se and those that have served. And I'm not sure why that is, but that has been a fact for many many years that those with
Mhm.
the military background are much more likely to become owners. Maybe Matt has an insight on that. That's a
Yeah.
staggering figure to me.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat one time, 1 in 7 business owners are veterans, which it could be higher than that. That was a couple years ago that I saw that, but it is
Well,
very interesting. But on that note, Matt, with just like I said, job security, do you feel
Yeah.
that franchise ownership, when veterans are looking for security, you mentioned yourself, you weren't
Yeah.
exactly sure what you wanted to do when you were
Yep.
transitioning out. And I do think that that's the case for a lot of veterans, unless, you are doing something very specific in the military that you just want to continue doing that outside of the military. But back to stats, I think there's another one that's like one in
Yeah.
three veterans are looking to do something completely different than what they did in the military. So, kind of from a
Yeah.
job security standpoint, do you think that there are certain traits that military veterans possess that sort of make them a better fit for franchise ownership than a traditional 9 to 5 opportunity?
Yeah, I think there are a few traits that lend to that. But I think, when folks are in transition in particular, the conventional wisdom is get a job. I mean, I think coming from the military environment, you're just not as exposed to as much business ownership because you're not interacting with a lot of folks that have taken an entrepreneurial risk and started a business. So I think particularly when you're in transition, that's the conventional wisdom. I think the other thing that is probably a factor for folks is that we could join the military for a lot of reasons, and there's so many great things about it. But one of those is not necessarily wealth creation. So I think that there is at least a mindset around, boy, I probably haven't accumulated enough assets in
Mhm.
order to go start or acquire a franchise. So I think that on that part, that's why you need to find an expert like Joe. You need to find somebody who can say, okay, with the assets that you have, because there's a full range of opportunities out there. So you really need somebody to guide you through that. As far as the kind of mindset around security, I think that there's a bit of a folks that haven't served or haven't spent a lot of time around those that have served. It's obviously not an entrepreneurial environment from a risk-taking, financial aspect when you're in, but there are certainly a lot of things that I'll just call it indicia of leadership that you have an opportunity to do when you're in a leadership role inside of the military. So, I mean, you oftentimes are doing a lot of the same things that folks in business are doing, which is you're tasked with, although you're in a chain of command and you're in a command and control structure, but within that, you have a lot of autonomy about how you get the job done. You have a lot of responsibility about completing the mission. So there's a lot of I'll call it extreme ownership that you feel inside of the military around the task, around the mission, around what it is that you're tasked to do. So I think that same and that just becomes a part of your DNA, just becomes a part of how you act. So I think that those are also things that make you really successful as a business owner. And so to me, it's not surprising that many folks that have look, when I was 22 years old, I was an officer deck for a warship, and that's a lot of responsibility for a 22-year-old. Not to question anyone's judgment, but so so when you're used to that kind of responsibility, to then have somebody that needs to proofread your cover letter is not you're not used to having those kinds of I'll call it just the business chain of command also has its limitations. So I think you're wired to want the ball, and so I think that business ownership to me makes perfect sense. That's an attribute that people want to flex.
Yeah.
Can I add to that? I think that response makes complete sense. And it's one of those things when you hear it out loud and you experience it's one thing. For a lot of folks, my experience when people are transitioning or exploring business ownership, there's an intimidation factor. And they don't know it because they haven't done it yet. And when you can, when you have a history of doing very hard things, it sets you up so very well. And you don't even know that it's accessible to you. I think that's the biggest gap is you think that the people that are going out and starting businesses and being successful, and really what matters to what I find often is it's controlling their life and their time and controlling their financial upside. They think that's for others. And I think universally people in transition think like other people are going and having that success. And those that have served maybe are a little bit closer to seeing like that can be me. And then the big gap is when they realize they can. It's a real mindset shift it's really it's incredibly empowering.
And I think on that, I think one of the things that you get when you serve is, you have you develop a track record for doing a lot of things that Joe just talked about, for just doing hard things, for doing challenging things that at the time you might not even appreciate that not everybody gets the chance to fire a torpedo or rappel down a wall or most offices don't get underway or deploy. So all the things that you might have experienced that you don't even realize that that's a really challenging thing. And so you build up kind of some muscle memory around doing hard things.
Yeah.
And you not only develop a track record for doing courageous things, but you develop a track record of accomplishment. And so I think that those are all the things that like every business journey has its challenges and its ups and downs as well. But if you can rely on that track record, I think that's a great source of confidence for somebody who's thinking about, is this the right time for me to buy a business or not?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that you guys both just shared in terms of military veterans maybe not being as married to their comfort zone as some of us are who didn't serve, because things are constantly changing and you're in situations where you're under pressure. And so you're learning to adapt and things like that maybe makes you a little bit more willing to take something that someone else might perceive to be a large risk, like owning your own business. And then Matt, I love that you said, which this hadn't even really occurred to me before, but One thing that that we hear a lot from candidates working with them on jobs when they transition off of active duty is you have these jobs in the military where you have so much that you're responsible for, and you come out thinking, oh, I'm going to get this great job where I'm in a leadership role and I'm in control of A, B, and C. And it doesn't always work out that way because a lot of times, unfortunately, the private sector, they want some experience outside of the military. There's not always, at least in the eyes of a hiring manager, that direct translatable leadership experience, even though we know that those are great qualities that would be beneficial
Mhm.
to any company. So um, that's also an interesting perspective to look at it, in that a lot of times we almost try to tell people, we know that you have these skills and you will get into a job that pays you well and you're appreciated, but you might have to take a little bit of a step back from where you thought you were going to and work your way up. And it's not really, that wouldn't necessarily be what it was like in this situation. If you were to own a business, you get to use all of those skills that you kind of acquired in the military
Mhm.
and flex those muscles. So that was a really good point.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think, on that point, both for folks that are contemplating business ownership and don't take the risk and they stay in their corporate job. My advice on that point is that, character wins out over time. So I think that whatever organization you're in, keep doing what you're doing, keep operating with
Mhm.
integrity, keep hustling, keep working hard, and whatever setting you're in, your employer is going to see that and recognize it. At the same time, if you are in the shoes of somebody who's contemplating business ownership, that is a way to really flex that and go right to the top with those skills and that
Mhm.
character and that mindset that you have in you. Best way to really make sure you're not taking any chance on somebody discovering it is to go do it yourself and get that business going.
Mhm. Well, I'm curious from both of you, because we've talked about these intangible skills that are often acquired in the military, like leadership and adaptability. Do you find, and Matt, maybe I'll ask you from your personal experience, and then Joe, what you kind of see talking to potential franchise owners. Do you guys ever kind of see an adjustment of mindset going from a world where there is more of a chain of command, set orders? Do you find that there's any sort of sometimes hesitancy when it comes to then transitioning into the world of business ownership? And is that something that you experienced, Matt?
Yeah, so I'll just point out that I have I've run a company that's a franchisor, so I've worked with a lot of franchisees and a lot of franchisees that were veterans. I've had another senior leadership role inside of a different franchisor where Joe and I work together. Well, actually, we work together both. But so I've not, I'm not taking that risk myself to acquire a business or to start a business, but I think it's really that within a command and control structure, there is still a lot of autonomy and a lot of personal responsibility and accountability to getting that result. So I think there's that. I think the other thing that's interesting about franchising, though, is that um, look, you take the financial risk and you sit in the big chair and you have these decisions to make, but you also have a structure that you are a part of. You've got things like, a franchise agreement and an operating agreement that lays out how you're to run the business. So you've got, you have a set of things to give you the guidance. You
Mhm.
normally have a franchisor, and Joe will make sure that you line up with the right franchisor so that you're getting the right support. So the expectation isn't that you are all on your own and you don't have any lifelines. Again, Joe knows that there's a lot of great opportunities out there and great organizations to be a part of that you would consider buying into, and Joe will guide you to the right ones. And those right ones have folks that will help you. So you have kind of the best of both. I mean, you have the autonomy, you have the ownership, you have the accountability for your own effort and results, but at the same time, you've got a whole bunch of resources, a bunch of people that are motivated to see you be really successful.
I hope this isn't anyone's tagline that I'm stealing and we have to like pay some sort of trademark fee or something. But I think what I hear, or what I've heard before, is in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So I
Yeah,
think that's pretty relevant to the
that's it.
franchise opportunity because, Matt, to your point, with most franchises. And Joe, you can maybe speak to this in a little bit more detail because I'm sure it varies depending on the franchise, but there is so much support from corporate to get you up and running. So from your experience, Joe, is there anything that you want to weigh in on this?
We just have one thing that being action oriented is a huge deal. You can have the best opportunity and the best support,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be all for naught if you're not action oriented. And I think that's what separates people that make this leap and those that don't, because you're not looking to create a new game, right? Where business is a game in itself, right? And make it baseball instead. We're not recreating baseball and creating some new version. Baseball players know their role. They know whether they're a right fielder or a pitcher. They play that role really well. They have autonomy in how they do it, but they can run with that role they have. And folks that are action oriented and join a business or a franchise organization want to come in and play the game really, really well. They're not, generally speaking, your creative type, maybe on the other hand, which is creating something brand new and seeing if it works. They want to go do something that's been proven out and run with that position.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I think that kind of leads to some of the most common objections would probably be fear and uncertainty. So, from your experience, can either of you share a story or maybe even some just common doubts that some people have, myths even that people have about franchise ownership? And yeah, if you have a success story of someone who has kind of succeeded through that, what were some of the things that helped them push through?
Can I take the basics here? And Matt might have a better story.
Sure. Yeah.
So I tell people usually my very first meeting with them when they're just exploring, they're not making decisions. They're seeing if this is even the right first step. You need to have time, interest, and money. And it often is not the right time to pursue a business because of one of those reasons. Those are the basic blocks that you have to have. You have to have time to commit to a business. Many, many people come to me and said, I want to invest in something and I want to do it 2 hours a week and I want to make a bunch of money. I tell them, good luck, but it's not owning a business. Go put it in a bond or a stock, but it's not business ownership. So you have to have time to commit to growing a business. You have to have some finances. Now, there's investments of all different ranges from, I'd say under $50,000 to multiple millions of dollars. But you've got to have some assets to get a business started because it takes money to start a business of any size. And interest is the trickiest one. Usually these are motivated people. We want to do something, but we don't know what that perfect fit is. And so that takes the most vetting out to find what is it. Matt and I worked with a gentleman also named Joe years ago. And he told me at one time, all business is solving problems. You have to be in the business that solves the problems you like handling. I thought that was very simple, exceptional wisdom. And so that's the hardest fit in my mind is can you find a business that is solving the problems you like solving? Because that's where you're going to excel.
Yeah.
I think as I reflected on that, Megan, I think it's look, any path has that fear and uncertainty, right? I mean, there's anxiety and sort of whatever path you take, whether it's to have a job, start a business, buy a house, whatever it might be. So I think one of the things that you develop in the military, and again, you might not even realize it until you start to actualize this in the real world, is what your strategies are to mitigate that risk. So whether it's the first time you take on a challenging watch, or that you have to take on a mission that you're uncomfortable with. I mean, you develop strategies for how you're going to get ready for it, and you know that there's no you can't delay it. So you're going to have to step into the breach, and you're going to have to do the hard thing. Some of those strategies are, one of the great things about the military is you usually can find somebody to be a sounding board, to be a coach, to help you through it. I think in this process, it's finding a running mate, and in this case, it's somebody like Joe who can guide you. I mean, it's somebody who can help you with that process. because you don't have to be the pioneer. You don't have to be the first person to figure this out. I mean, there's folks that have paved the way and have gone down that road before, and that you can count on to guide you to the right thing. So that's why I believe in Joe and what he's doing, and why I think that is a good strategy for if you're going through that uncertainty. I think the other thing that I'd advise people, and it goes back to what Joe said a minute about being action oriented. A similar mentor of mine that said, that the best two words of advice is don't dither. I mean, it's continue to be action oriented. Continue, I mean, I think it's uh, more good things will happen if you dive for the ball than if you just watch the ball roll out of bounds. So get on the floor and dive and make it happen. I think it's, in as a Navy guy, in deference to the Army, I'll quote Patton's. A good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow. So get going. I mean, more good things will happen if you're taking action than if you're, sitting back in your chair and scratching your chin.
Yeah, definitely. And Joe, I love the kind of perspective that you bring as a franchise consultant, because we've had other people from franchises on the podcast in the past, and, great franchises. But what I think makes you special and kind of in a really great position here for our listeners is that you have access to so many different franchises. And so the quote that you just brought up, solving problems that you essentially that you want to solve. I mean, that's great, because then you have so many different things to choose from. I mean, there's so many different things. So what is it that appeals to you? And I like that aspect of it. I think that will be really valuable for our listeners.
I appreciate that. I think what it does is, uh, mentality wise, some of us get stuck in vicious cycles, but the
Mhm.
inverse can also happen. And virtuous cycles, or I think what that leads to, which is a really beautiful kind of upswing.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I do want to talk a little bit more about kind of Joe, what you do in terms of the franchise consulting piece. But Matt, as a veteran, if there's somebody else who's watching or listening to this that is kind of interested in business ownership, or they've been out for a few years and they're just feeling stuck, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I think it's there's you have plenty of those times to take um, that feed your soul. What is it that you know that you have been successful at, and how do you leverage those things, into your next spot? So some of these I've mentioned before, but it is gaining confidence from that track record of accomplishment. You've done hard
Hmm.
things, you've done challenging things, you've done the noble and the right thing in the time that you serve. So you've got that in the bank, and so I think that's probably the strongest thing that you can lean on is that track record of
Hmm.
that you just that's it. That anybody who's got an honorable discharge has got that. You've
Yeah.
got something in the bank.
And taking action, like you mentioned,
Yeah,
one of the most
exactly.
important. Yeah. Well, Joe, so a little bit more about Ross franchising and to talk about your role in it. I don't know if I was recording at the time, but when we first got on this, I was kind of saying how Orion is like the matchmaker between companies and candidates. And so in this situation, you're kind of the matchmaker. So what would the
I have, yeah.
process be like for someone working with you?
Yeah, and a matchmaker is a great way to think of it. So I match aspiring business owners to the really huge variety of options out there. And don't forget, there's someone on the other side of this coin, right? There's franchise organizations that are wanting to find great local owners. And that's for lots of reasons, right? Great franchisees are more fun to work with. They're more profitable. They stick around longer. So for all my clients' interest in finding a franchise, there's a franchisor wanting to find them. So it's
Hmm.
really fun to be that conduit. And my main responsibility, I think, is to be helpful, and that can be a variety of ways, and to do the right thing. There are this is certainly a an arena where you can get in the weeds fast. And what I try to do really initially is learn as much about my clients as possible. The more I know, the better I can educate my presentation or narrow my field for what to present to them as potential options. And then it's really a process of just um, options and feedback and revise those options and feedback. It generally takes 2 to 3 months for someone that comes to me to find a good fit. That's not a quick process, and you can't really expedite that much faster. It's too big of a decision to rush through without doing all the right, um, really all the right screening.
Yeah. Well, it's an investment because from our perspective at Orion, where we similar roles sometimes play matchmakers between candidates and companies. You accept a job, you don't like it, you could quit the next day. We don't want people to do that. Obviously, we want them to find a job they love and stay. But yeah, with the business ownership, you're investing more. And so you want to make sure that it's the right fit. You want to make sure that it's the right fit for, the potential franchisee. Same with the franchisor. Joe, do you see that a lot of franchisors also kind of gravitate towards military veterans for some of the reasons that we've already mentioned, like the leadership qualities and the fact that they are more likely to kind of own a franchise? Do you kind of see a preference there?
Absolutely. I mean, franchisors, I've never met a franchisor that hasn't specifically wanted to work with veterans for
Yeah.
all the reasons we've mentioned. It's just a beautiful alignment. And we've hinted at this a little bit, but I think one of the pivotal things is there are lots of very happy, bright, capable people that are they may not be satisfied with their careers or their work, and they can continue and finish their careers in that way and be happy and be fine. There is a segment of people that they will not stick with survival. Like that's not good enough for them and
Hmm.
their career experience. They really want to optimize it. And one really big way to optimize their life is through ownership. I mean, we know that business owners, it's not all about economics, but it's an important part that people need to talk candidly about. Business owners have 4 to 5 times more earning potential than employees. That's a very significant impact. And these are often people that have spent 5, 10, 20 years really serving others, right? It's
Hmm.
kind of God and country first for so long that this is a little bit of a pivot in mindset that, hey, I'm going to do something that's more quote unquote for me, but it's still serving, it's employing people, it's leading people, and while building maybe something that's a little bit more personal for their career.
Yeah. Matt, from your perspective, because I know that you and Joe have worked together and you
Yeah.
both clearly think very highly of each other. So, um, from you, what would you say in terms of what would be the most important thing about working with a knowledgeable advisor like Joe?
Yeah. So one of the things that I was just thinking about as Joe was giving his answer was I think another thing that people don't really appreciate about the fit between veterans and franchise ownership is most franchise businesses at some level you can say are people businesses. And you don't necessarily think of the military as a people organization like that, but if you've had a leadership position in the military, you have been in a people business. You've led people, you've persuaded people, you've talked to people about doing things that they didn't necessarily want to do, and you got them to do it. And you got them to do it really well. So I think that is an opportunity that we can continue to think about tapping into.
Mhm.
I think as it relates to Joe specifically, and I'm gonna make him uncomfortable for a minute, but uh, just you will not find anybody more conscientious. You won't find anybody that is a better servant leader than Joe, and those are things that are really important for this. You might find a few people that are smarter, but you won't find anybody more knowledgeable than Joe. And I think the other thing that you'll one of the reasons that when I have been asked, the first person that I would recommend and have recommended is Joe is this that Joe is not gonna talk you into anything. Um, Joe is going to guide you and support you, and you're going to come to the right decision together, but he's not going to talk you into it. And in fact, he might talk you out of it. If you're looking for somebody to give you just sort of, unmitigated, reassurance that your crazy idea is the right one, then, get married or get a dog. But if you want somebody to give you the right feedback to make a really important decision and have the courage to do it. As my wife says, you need somebody to tell you your dress is ugly. Joe's a straight talk express. Joe will tell you not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear, with the ultimate mission of making the right decision for you and your family. So that's why if anyone ever asks me, hey, I'm thinking about buying a franchise, I say, stop right there. Let me get you in touch with Joe. That's your first step.
Awesome. Well, Joe, how does that feel? That has to feel great.
Yeah, it's really an honor, and I'm gonna go back to where I started earlier on this call. I said I got into this business because of the people, and I got into franchising because I followed good people. And Matt, I really appreciate your words, and I think that carries through my sentiment of where I started my personal journey, and I hope that's the start of other people's journey. You
Yeah.
are, especially in the service, you're coming from an incredible um, fraternity of people. And I think business ownership and franchising, it's not going to be the same, but it can provide an incredible community of people that is a lot of fun to be around. It's about making a living and providing for others, but it's also a lot of fun. And I hope to introduce that to other people, and take it from there. So I appreciate those kind of words.
That's awesome. Well, this has been such a great conversation with you both. I really appreciate you both sharing your expertise on this subject. I guess before we move on and wrap things up, is there anything that you guys want to share about what's next in your respective businesses, orbits? Matt, I'll let you go first.
No, again, this has been a lot of fun. It's a topic that I'm passionate about. Could talk much longer than your listeners would want about this topic. I always look forward to when I'm running a business, whether it's franchise or otherwise. If I have the opportunity to work with veterans, I always, in my mind, the reference check is done. So it's something that I'm passionate about, and I'm really excited about the idea of, because of our half an hour conversation here. If more veterans buy franchises and they do it because Joe gets them there, then I think that makes everybody better. So I'm excited for that.
Awesome. Joe, what about you?
Yeah, for me, it almost sounds cliche or corny, but my journey is a lot of fun because it's so different every time. Like, I've got a handful of folks that are finalizing their franchise awards right now, and so I'll have a whole new crop of people. It's still a small number, a handful of people every month that are serious about this search, and
Mhm.
it's such an individual search. So my journey is kind of alongside them, and it's really fun and it's really dynamic. I mean, truly every day, because the backgrounds and their aspirations are so different. So I couldn't tell you what my next week's going to bring, but I know I'll enjoy it, and I'll have fun with it.
What I love about that, Joe, is how rewarding that must feel because, we get a small taste of that placing people into careers at Orion, which is great too. But with this, you not only get to impact people's lives on such a larger scale because of the fact that if you're a business owner, it's such a large part of your life, but then even paying it forward, hiring other people, hiring other veterans, serving the community. And so the impact just goes probably far beyond what, most people kind of have in their jobs.
It's incredibly purposeful work, and I hope
Mhm.
that I'm connecting people to very purposeful work. It is very rewarding.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. And I look forward to keeping in touch and hopefully, Joe, having lots of people signing up for franchises and working with you after this.
I appreciate it, Megan. Matt, always good to see you.
Yeah, it's a
Thank
lot
you
of
both for
fun.
your time.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Orion's From the Battlefield to the Boardroom podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or SoundCloud so that you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you, so if you have any feedback, please send me an email at podcast@oriontalent.com. Our goal is to help all military job seekers through their transition and beyond, so make sure you share our show with your friends. See you next time.